Hey guys, Brass Facts here, this time about Ambi Controls. Not just, as you guys know, as a crippled lefty, but for right-handed users as well. Ambi Controls have sort of weaseled their way into not just being for those crippled left-handed users, but also augmenting how right-handed users can use their rifles. Unfortunately, I think Ambi Controls, mostly as a vestige of how Ambi Controls used to be done, are kind of nowadays done wrong, or at least some of them are done wrong. And as someone that is very familiar with Ambi Controls, I kind of want to talk about it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about Ambi Controls built into a lower receiver, what you can do both as a lefty and righty to enhance your basic milspec lower for just some nicer controls, and probably some stuff in between. And a lot of left-handed jokes in the comments. By the way, if you want something that can really piss you off about me being a left-handed shooter, I do a lot of stuff right-handed. In fact, the only thing I do left-handed is writing and shooting. And that's because I'm left-eye dominant. So at some point early on in my shooting career, I actually switched from right shooting to left-handed shooting. Which, yeah, so I'm voluntarily crippled. How does that feel? Pretty disgusting, actually.
Right at the get-go, I think people underestimate how fast you can be as a lefty. So much so that when I do run a stock AR-15, people get generally upset at me because they don't realize I'm a lefty, and just think I'm doing right-handed reloads extremely weirdly.
Nice and fast.
No, really, on the PWS piston video, I got like 30 plus comments about that, calling me an idiot. Which, I am, but for not that reason. In fact, overall, I'd argue lefties are much, much closer and in some ways superior to stock right-handed users, as we can both see into the chamber at all times, so we're very aware of the status of our weapon. We can drop or lock the bolt with our firing hand without breaking grip, but, of course, as a lefty, we have an Achilles heel. And that is the safety manipulation, which is not quite, but approaching AK tiers of weird.
I'm dyslexic.
Where we have to kind of come over the top, or not have our thumb wrapped around the grip, sort of long-range style. We can of course solve the minor issue with an Ambi safety, something both lefties and righties are trending towards. Moving it on to mag release, for righties, obviously there is no upside of having a second mag release in my opinion. As a lefty, it's by no means mandatory, especially since, in most circumstances you're actually probably going to be retaining or stripping magazines manually, in which case you don't really need to be able to engage the magazine release with your pointer finger. This is especially common when we have the rifle not parallel to the ground, so when you're behind cover and it's going muzzle up, because the mag's not even going to fall free anyway, so the need to be able to drop the magazine without support hand input is completely unnecessary. But I'll admit, cool guy reloads are cool, and I prefer being able to use my trigger finger, so I use this FCD one, which is by far my favorite, though it comes with the downside of being a bit large, and it does occasionally result in me jettisoning the mag in either orientation of the rifle, as, well, both sides now have a mag release. The Norgan somewhat solves this problem, as it's incredibly minimalistic and shrouded. On the flip side of the aisle, and for 90% of you, there's really not much to do outside of maybe wanting to speed up your reloads and making malfunctions and administrative tasks easier, where something like a mag-pull bad lever gets the job done without too much effort. But that's really it. A bad lever type device for righties, Ambi safety for lefties. If you really want to chase cool guy fast Instagram splits, throw in an Ambi charging handle for both, and an Ambi mag release for lefties. That's it. Done. No need for a $300 to $350 billet lower receiver. No, really, I'm serious. This is how I recommend doing it for most people, especially lefties. Keep it simple, get what you need, leave everything else off. Okay, fine. While the lion's share of my lower receivers are as described, standard lowers with itty bits attached to it, I do find there's upsides to a purpose-built design both for lefties and righties aiming to get a bit of enhancements. The bad lever has its share of controversy, and while a bit overstated, it's nice having functionally the same thing built into the receiver to overcome the clusterfuck that is bolt lock on a right-handed configuration. Lefties would also prefer to have a bit more of a shrouded mag release, and some of the other features end up being beneficial as well. But the question now is, with every single manufacturer splurging out their Ambi lower, which is now the best thing since sliced bread, I'm serious, people really love bragging about Ambi lower receivers, which one do you get? Well, there's a ton on the market, so I think it's easier just to summarize them as two distinct categories. There's mirrored lower receivers, and then there's what I would call enhanced lower receivers, and then there's a couple options that bridge the gap. Let's start with the mirrored lowers. These functionally aim to create a lower that, as the name implies, mirrors controls as close to identically on both sides as, well, possible. The LMT Mars and the Aero Pro come to mind as perhaps the most blatant examples. These were how Ambis were done for a very long time, but let's interrogate the concept of doing it this way for a second. The requirement of having a rifle that can be used for both lefties and righties with the exact same training and manual of arms is a bit antiquated, and more of a thing that made sense back when selling a rifle to a military where one-size-fits-all approach was needed. But as a citizen that is building and buying his own rifle, I think we can optimize it for our own use a little bit more. Mirrored controls are not without downsides. As a righty, you don't want that extra mag release. Big formal complaint by the Army with the NGSW is that the Ambi mag release on the 6.8 Spear is not shrouded enough, and righties are now dropping mags. Having a bolt catch bolt release as an identical copy to the standard side is also just weird, right? As such, a large paddle takes up a lot of space on the receiver and thus must be in a much more rearward position. This is a tad harder to reach as a lefty doing a standard thumb style reload, much like a righty.
This man is not left-handed.
It's too far back.
And for righties that want to do the trigger finger bolt drop, it's also similarly awkward as you have to pivot way up.
So awkward.
Also admitting defeat as a steward of lefty gang, pushing towards the receiver to drop the bolt with your trigger finger isn't nearly as easy as you might think. It's actually quite awkward.
Fuck!
And as such, you'll see me often breaking my firing grip to reach that paddle with a little bit more authority. So copying that intentionally for righty seems backwards. You could of course argue you want a rifle configured in a mirrored manner so your lefty friend can pick it up, or such that you can use the rifle opposite-handed holding corners or after being wounded. But remember, we being lefties can run stock rifles acceptably. No need to optimize for that 1% scenario and a half a second increase on a reload. So it's not to say these lowers aren't bad. I don't really mind them at all. They work, they get the job done. But when we look at the price tag, the ability to buy other stuff, and some of the downsides that come along with it, especially for right-handed users, I think we can be a bit more picky. This is why I think we're seeing the industry trend towards enhanced Ambi lowers, which is why I also like them. These lowers are designed to give you ergonomic advantages built into the lower, but don't chase identical controls on both sides. With these, I'm referring to the Griffin Mark II, the ADM UIC, or the Radian ADAC. All of these are basically the same, except the ADAC and the ADM UIC are a Griffin Mark II, but now they're billet, and it costs, another $200 extra for no appreciable difference other than, well, I guess you look cool at the range. I have some criticisms with these as well because in an effort to have one product for both left and right-handed users, it is slightly less optimal in the sense that these all come with left-side mag releases, thus giving a mag release for the left-handed person. I keep harping on this, but for a righty, this is extremely unoptimal as you really don't want that on the other side. But other than that, these do come with upsides, namely the bolt release is now a up and down motion, essentially mounting a bad lever into the receiver itself, which is, a little more comfy considering how many videos we see of dudes fucking torching around into low Earth orbit when they fuck up their bad lever manipulation. The Munition Works and others like it do away with that bolt lock feature, only having a bolt release feature, as it believes that, bolt lock is an administrative task, so not as time sensitive, or malfunctions, which require a bolt lock many times, are also extremely rare. This also doubles nicely for lefties who only care about bolt forwarding, as we can do bolt locks extremely easy with a standard bolt paddle on the left side of the gun. It seems like we're splitting hairs here, and, yeah, we're buying a custom lower when the regular one works just fine. Of course we're splitting hairs. But these lowers put a bolt catch and release on the right side with a much easier motion of up and down instead of pushing inboard, which is difficult once again to do with muzzle up reloads.
Energy and impulse.
Sectional energy. Gross.
That is absolutely fucking horrific.
So yeah, summing it all up, if I was a right-handed user, personally, I don't think there's much upside to seeking out a Ambi lower receiver just to shave 0.01 seconds off of your reload with your bolt forwarding device. Really, the only thing that I think is advantageous is the addition of that bolt catch feature functioning like an Ambi bad. But even that seems like a lot of work for something that happens very rarely. From a left-handed perspective, Ambi lowers are definitely just overbloated in features, and once again, an Ambi safety and a simple mag release is really all you need to get her done. But Ambi lowers do come with rifles nowadays, and as a lefty at least, the ability to have options, especially when I do compressed reloads, is appreciated, and why I've gravitated towards the very simplistic, let's just say munition works type lower receivers, where all there is a bolt release on one side, and that's the only feature added on top of, the Ambi safety and Ambi charging hand.
A weird quirk you've probably noticed throughout all the videos now that the righties have taken off is this left-hand upper receiver. Look, a lot of people ask me why, as a lefty, I don't use a left-handed upper receiver. That is, you'll notice, shit ejects out the left, not the right. And for most of the time, I was just like, I haven't really bothered. I recently went out and bought this CAC left-hand upper receiver group. Essentially, the only difference is the bolt carrier group and bolt are slightly different to accommodate left-hand eject. Everything else about it is mil-spec. More or less. And running this thing, I've really kind of had my opinion reinforced. It seems a little unnecessary to have a left-hand upper receiver group. Is it nice? Oh yeah, I'm getting slightly less gas to the face, and more importantly, my entire forearm isn't getting pelted by brass and bits of explosion that embed themselves in my skin and then I need to pick out later with a pocket knife. But outside of that, that seems like a pretty minor upside to pay to have what is essentially a proprietary guts of your upper receiver group. That is, the functioning parts of your firearm are not AR-15 compatible. So yeah, it's nice, it's convenient, but it doesn't really change things. Also, the CAC upper receiver doesn't have a dust cover because the bolt catch is in the way and they didn't want to engineer the reverse-sided stag arms one. So, yeah. I mean, it's neat, but... yeah, no gas to the face. That is an upside, I guess. But, I don't know. Buy a flow can or something.
Coral.